A millionaire's one-night stand with a virgin turns into an obsession. Now he wants to marry her. The city at night shimmered beneath layers of artificial light, flickering LED billboards, glowing office windows, and the relentless stream of car headlights weaving through the veins of the metropolis. The chaotic symphony of honking horns, hurried footsteps, and pulsing electronic music from nearby clubs painted a portrait of urban madness. Damien Vale sat behind the wheel of a matte black Mercedes, silently maneuvering through the streets. Neon light bounced off his sharp cheekbones, his steel-gray eyes coldly scanning the cityscape through the windshield. At 36, Damien was a titan in the world of tech-driven entertainment, the CEO of Vale Media Group, a global empire known for cutting-edge visual effects and sound design. He had everything: power, wealth, recognition. And yet, nothing ever truly touched him. That day, after a grueling board meeting on the company's Asian expansion project, Damien felt drained. The luxury penthouse perched atop his headquarters only made him feel more suffocated. He didn't want to return, not to silence, not to another sterile night. So he drove, aimlessly, letting the city swallow him whole in a kind of emotional retreat he couldn't even name. His car came to an unexpected stop near an alley in the city's old art district, once an industrial print zone, now home to renegade artists and underground creators. A black-painted door emerged ahead, graffiti scrawled with messy white letters. The Lucid Vault. Damien stepped out, his blazer slung over his shoulder, and walked toward the entrance. The air inside was thick: cigarette smoke, sweat, laser beams. The place wasn't packed, but the energy was alive. Rebels in leather jackets, neon-dyed hair, and curious eyes all turned toward him, a man who looked far too polished, too out of place, and far too composed for this world. And then he saw her. At the center of a small stage, beneath alternating red and purple strobes, a girl danced, not to any strict rhythm, not with conventional moves. She became the light, commanding it, molding it with her body. Her turns were fluid, sharp, alive. Her hair was silver, naturally so, flowing down her back like strands of stardust. Her emerald eyes pierced through the dark. Her body, slender but undeniably strong, radiated purpose and power. She didn't just move to music, she told stories through it. The LED strips reacted to her like living entities responding to her unspoken cues. Damien stood still, hands in his pockets, eyes locked on her. He had seen hundreds of performances in his life, but no one had ever made him feel like this, as if something dormant inside him had just been shocked awake. Who was she? As the song ended, she bowed slightly, her silver hair cascading forward to veil her face. The room erupted in applause. Damien didn't clap. He just watched, unmoving. The girl stepped off stage, her thick-soled boots echoing against the old wooden floor. She was beautiful chaos in motion. Her name was Lyra Quinn, a free spirit, a nomadic artist drifting from city to city, making a living through performance and projection mapping. Her past was a wound too deep to forget, sold to a performance company by her parents at age 12. She had escaped at 16, vowing never to be owned again. Her naturally silver hair, a result of partial albinism, made her impossible to miss, but also served as a painful reminder of everything that had once set her apart. As she moved toward the bar, a group of drunk men blocked her path. "Hey, silver hair, dance for us again," one of them slurred, reaching for her arm. Lyra stepped back, her gaze sharp as a blade. "Move." Her voice was low, cold, unshaken. But they didn't move. One of them yanked the backpack off her shoulder, the one carrying her lighting gear. Damien had been watching from a distance, not intending to intervene. He wasn't the kind of man who played hero, but there was something in her eyes, strength laced with old scars, that made him step forward. "You should stop," Damien said, his voice deep and edged with ice. The group turned to argue, but the cold weight of Damien's stare made them hesitate. He didn't need to raise a hand, just a few words, a look, and they backed off, shoving the bag back into Lyra's hands before slinking away. Lyra stared at him, assessing. He was nearly a head taller, his black suit cut to perfection over a solid frame, and the faint scent of woodsy cologne caught her off guard. "I didn't need your help," she said sharply, though curiosity flickered beneath her tone. Damien smirked, one side of his mouth lifting in lazy arrogance. "Call it boredom. So, what now? A thank you? Or another glare?" She frowned, then shrugged. "A drink to settle the debt?" She motioned toward the bar. He followed, eyes never leaving her, as she ordered 2 shots of tequila. The conversation that followed was light at first, but slowly grew deeper, cutting into old wounds neither of them expected to share. "You don't seem like someone who hangs out in places like this," Lyra noted, taking a sip, her eyes grazing over his expensive suit. Damien chuckled. "And you don't seem like someone who offers drinks to strangers." She gave a cold laugh. "I'd rather dance in the wind than live in a golden cage like yours. Vale Media, right? I know who you are." Damien was surprised, though he didn't show it. "Then you know I could give you the world." Lyra shook her head. "I don't want your world. I want freedom." As the club closed, rain began to fall hard outside. Damien offered to take her home. "I don't have a home," she said, her eyes glittering with defiance. "But if you're not afraid of getting wet, come with me." They made their way through a narrow alley toward an old warehouse nearby, her temporary sanctuary. Inside, the space was transformed into a lighting lab. Violet LED strips hung across the walls, outdated stage equipment lay in corners, and a small bed rested beneath the flickering lights. Lyra switched on one of the strips, the glow illuminating her face, making her green eyes burn even brighter. "This is where I stay when I'm in this city," she said, her voice softer now. Damien stepped forward, fingers brushing a glowing strip, but his eyes stayed fixed on her. "You're unlike anyone I've ever met," he murmured. Lyra smirked. "So are you, but don't think I'm staying." She barely finished the sentence before Damien pulled her in, his lips crashing onto hers in a sudden, urgent kiss. Lyra responded instinctively, unable to resist the heat rushing between them. The kiss deepened, intense, consuming, as if they were the only 2 people in the world. That night, they lost control. Passion eclipsed hesitation. Bodies entwined beneath the shimmering lights. But when Damien realized she was a virgin, the slight pause in her movements, the flicker of innocence in her eyes, he froze. He had assumed she was experienced, untethered. But this revelation awakened something far deeper than desire. It sparked something primal, protective. Damien woke to the faint warmth of morning light filtering through the dusty warehouse window. The room was unusually quiet. Beside him, the bed was empty. Lyra was gone. All that remained was a violet LED strip, softly glowing on the pillow, an unspoken goodbye, a trace so delicate it almost made the night feel like a dream. He sat upright, chest hollow, the sheets beside him still warm where she had laid just hours ago. He had known solitude for most of his life, but this emptiness wasn't silence. It was the ache of something unfinished, something worth chasing. Instead of returning to his sterile penthouse, Damien drove straight to Vale Media's headquarters. His office, perched atop the tower, was a glass-walled fortress with a commanding view of the city. But today, there was no control in his gaze, only unrest. He pressed the intercom. "Get the tech team up here, now." Within minutes, 5 engineers walked in, laptops slung over their shoulders, faces a mix of concern and curiosity. Damien rose from his chair, eyes sharp as steel. "I need you to find someone. Lyra Quinn, female, around 28. Silver hair, natural, green eyes." She's a light artist and a performer. She left this morning." A young engineer hesitated. "Do you have more details? Social media? Address?" "I don't care if she has any," Damien cut in. "Use whatever you need. AI, facial recognition, hack if you have to. I want her location by tonight." They nodded and quickly left. Damien sank into his chair again, eyes fixed on the skyline, though his thoughts were far, far away, lost in a memory that still glowed violet. Over 30 kilometers away, Lyra sat hunched on a creaky motel bed. The room was dim and worn, the flickering neon sign outside casting ghostly shadows across the peeling walls. Her laptop was open, on screen, a lighting layout for an upcoming festival. But her eyes weren't focused. Her hand moved the mouse. Her mind was elsewhere, staring into steel-gray eyes that had held her all night long. "Stupid," she whispered, then slammed the laptop shut. One night, one lapse of judgment, and she had let someone into her world. Damien Vale, powerful, dangerous, and impossible to resist. But something about him wasn't fake. In his eyes, in his touch, there was something honest, and that scared her even more. She stepped onto the balcony, wind whipping her silver hair around her face. She inhaled deeply, cold air cutting through her emotions. She had run from control her entire life. But Damien, he wasn't like the others. That's what made him more dangerous. She had to forget him. That afternoon, Damien received an update from his tech team. Security camera at an outdoor light festival picked up a match. Coordinates followed. Without a second thought, Damien's car roared out of the underground lot, tires screeching as he vanished into the crowd. The festival grounds were once an industrial graveyard, now reborn as a sprawling, chaotic wonderland. Walls sprayed with graffiti, neon beams slashing across the sky. Sound and color collided from every corner. Damien, in a black suit, was a shadow among chaos. But he didn't care. And then he saw her. On the central stage, under shifting red and teal lights, Lyra danced. No words could describe it. She wasn't performing. She was telling a story. With her body, her light, her pain. Her silver hair moved like starlight. The music faded into a hush only he could hear. Her green eyes gleamed with raw focus. Damien froze, heart pounding. Damien froze, heart pounding. As the music ended, she bowed. The crowd erupted. She stepped down, sweat glistening, backpack over one shoulder. And then she saw him. Damien emerged from the crowd, their eyes locked. No words, only silence. "What are you doing here?" she asked, voice rough, breath uneven. "You left without a word," he said quietly. "I need to know why." "I don't belong to you," she turned away. "Don't waste your time." But he stepped closer, gently taking her wrist, not forceful, just enough. "One night, and I can't stop thinking about you," he said, voice trembling. "I don't know what this is, but I know I don't want to let you go." Her eyes flickered. She wanted to run. She always did. But in his eyes, there was something that held her. And then they kissed. In the middle of music, lights, and faceless strangers, Damien pulled her into him. Their lips collided, desperate, wild, hungry. The world blurred. All that existed was breath and heat. But then clarity hit her like cold air. Lyra broke away, panic in her eyes. "Don't," she whispered, her voice shaking. And before he could speak, she vanished into the crowd, like a light switched off. Damien stood there, heart racing. Her warmth still lingered on his skin. And this time, he knew. She would run again. But he wouldn't let her be gone forever. Lyra ran, through the crowd, past the flashing lights, through the cheers still echoing behind her. Each step was a heartbeat pounding in her ears. She wasn't sure who she was running from more, Damien Vale or the storm of feelings he had just stirred inside her. She couldn't afford to feel, to trust, to let anyone touch the pieces of her that had once been broken. 2 days later, every venue Lyra had scheduled suddenly canceled her bookings. No explanations, no replies to her messages. Doors that once welcomed her now silently closed. She understood immediately. It was Damien. He was exerting control, the way people with money and power always did. She felt angry, betrayed, but most of all, she felt hurt. That night, as she stepped out of the motel, a sleek black SUV pulled up. 3 men in tailored suits got out. "Miss Lyra Quinn?" one of them asked, polite but unyielding. "Mr. Damien Vale would like to see you." Lyra stepped back. "I'm not going anywhere." But before she could turn away, 2 of them gently but firmly guided her into the car. She didn't resist, not because she agreed, but because she was tired of running. The elevator opened into Damien's penthouse atop Vale Media headquarters. The space was another world, floor-to-ceiling glass, ambient lighting, minimalist elegance. Damien stood before the window, back turned, black dress shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, his frame tense like a string pulled too tight. He heard her footsteps, turned, and locked eyes with her. "What do you think you're doing?" Lyra's voice cut through the silence. "Canceling my shows? Dragging me here like some doll?" Damien approached, hands in his pockets, unwavering. "I don't want you to run anymore," he said, voice low and rough. "I gave you the chance to walk away, but you're still here, in my mind, every second." Lyra let out a bitter laugh, backing up. "You're insane. You think you can control everything, but I'm not a program you can code." She turned to leave. He called, "Lyra." She paused, and then he dropped to one knee. Lyra froze. There he was, Damien Vale, a man of power known for cold logic and perfect control, kneeling before her. "I don't want to own you," Damien said, voice steady. "I want you to be my wife, my equal, not my captive." He reached out, brushing his fingers against hers. "I want you to have freedom, in my world. Let me build a space for you where no one can ever hurt you again." Lyra stepped back, pulling her hand away. "You're dreaming. I don't belong in your world. I can't." She turned, but Damien gently took her shoulders, not forceful, just enough to hold her in place. "I won't force you," he whispered, "but I'll prove I'm not like the ones who broke you." Lyra stared at him. Her sharpness faded. A part of her wanted to believe, a part still trembled in fear. Lyra stood still. She stared at the thick folder Damien's assistant had placed on the table. His face remained stoic, but something in his eyes had shifted. She didn't need to open it. She already knew what was inside. The secrets she had tried to bury, the shame she had folded up and locked away. "You know everything now?" she asked quietly, voice trembling. Not from fear, but from disbelief. "I know enough to protect you," Damien replied, his voice firm, unwavering. Lyra turned her face away, afraid he might see something raw in her gaze. She had assumed he was like all the others, hungry for control, for possession, destined to abandon her the way her parents once had. But no one had ever stood up for her. No one had ever challenged her father. No one had ever risked reputation to defend a silver-haired girl with a stained past. But Damien had, without demanding anything in return, no promises, no conditions, no expectation of gratitude. "I'm not going to destroy them," he added, more gently, "unless they try to hurt you again." That sentence, so simple yet so heavy, hit something deep inside Lyra, a place she had locked, sealed, denied. She turned back to look at him, and for the first time, her eyes weren't sharp like blades. They shimmered, soft but not weak, just unguarded. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. Damien didn't move closer. He didn't touch her. He simply answered, with honesty, because you deserve someone to stand up for you, at least once in your life." Lyra drew in a breath. The walls inside her didn't crumble all at once, but the cracks had started. For the first time in years, she felt her heart soften. She didn't say, "Thank you," but her eyes said everything. And in that silent moment, between unguarded glances and two hearts beginning to shed their armor, Damien knew he couldn't wait any longer. Lyra sat quietly by the glass window, the city lights casting broken reflections across her face, patches of silver, violet, and shadow. In the distance, Damien spoke on the phone, his voice deep and composed. Not forceful, not demanding. She turned her head to watch him, the man who had defied her father when no one else dared, the man who ignored reputation, stock prices, and public opinion just to protect her, the man who didn't need a grand reason to stand in the storm. Only one. Her. A wave rose in Lyra's chest. Not fear. Something warmer. Stranger. A feeling she had believed was impossible for someone like her, to be loved without having to run. Damien walked toward her, and his gaze softened the moment their eyes met. He didn't ask questions. He didn't try to guess what she felt. Instead, he pulled a small velvet box from his coat and placed it gently on the table. There was no grand gesture, no kneeling, no music, just him, honest, vulnerable, and real. "I know you've spent too long living in fear," Damien said quietly. "I don't want to chain you down, but if you'll allow it, I want to be someone you can trust, someone you can lean on, not as a man with power, but as a husband." Lyra held her breath. "Marry me, Lyra, not because you need shelter, but because I need you to be the one light that guides the rest of my life." She looked at the ring, a simple silver band, no gemstones, engraved with a subtle pattern of beams like LED light trails. It reminded her of the first glow she saw as a child hidden in the darkness behind stage curtains. Her heart clenched. For years she had survived on instinct. She had run, she had fought, she had built walls. But not once had she truly lived in love. And now it was here, quiet, steady, sincere. Lyra looked up, her eyes still hesitant, but no longer fleeing. Her lips parted, voice barely more than a breath, just enough for the two of them. "I've never trusted anyone, but I want to try, just once." Damien didn't laugh or cheer. He simply closed his eyes, as if exhaling years of tension he had carried chasing her. Then he slipped the ring onto her finger, without witnesses, without blessings, because in that moment they already had each other. They thought the past had fallen silent, that love could heal all wounds. But just as happiness began to bloom, the ghosts of yesterday returned, louder, darker, and more relentless than ever. The wedding took place in a strange space, an old exhibition hall, thick with the dust of time. Once used to display light installations, it now bore witness to two scarred souls choosing each other once more. Lyra designed the lighting herself, purple, crimson, and silver LED strips floating overhead like galaxies in a quiet midnight sky. Damien curated the sound, a haunting mix of electronic beats and drifting violin melodies that breathed like their love, part modern, part aching nostalgia. There was no traditional wedding gown, no lavish banquet. Lyra wore a sleek black silk dress embroidered with silver threads. Her hair flowed loose. Her eyes, rimmed with fine eyeliner, held a calm defiance. She walked across the creaking wooden floor, a floor once graced by countless forgotten artists, now holding the footprints of a girl who once ran from her past and was now ready to face it. Damien looked at her like nothing else in the world existed. They exchanged rings, two silver bands engraved with stars, symbolizing the light that found them after years of darkness. In that moment, Lyra didn't cry, but her heart trembled like a violin string softly plucked, not out of fear, but because for the first time in her life she felt chosen, not bought, not bartered, chosen. But joy never lingers for long. 3 weeks after the wedding, Damien received an anonymous email from a corporate giant, Mirage Group. The message was brief and cold. "We possess evidence that Lyra Quinn embezzled millions while working under our former subsidiaries. If you do not turn her over publicly, this information will be released. Damien Vale will lose everything." A chill ran through Damien's spine. He immediately summoned his legal team, ordering a full sweep on Mirage. They quickly confirmed there was no real verifiable evidence. But that was the terrifying part. Mirage didn't need the truth. They just needed a narrative. The media would do the rest. Damien kept the email from Lyra for a few days, trying to protect her. But the truth couldn't stay buried. One night, he brought her into his office, eyes heavy. "You need to see this," he said quietly. Lyra took the file he handed over. Inside were screenshots of the blackmail, fake headlines, doctored images from past shows, falsified invoices. Her hands shook, her whole body stiffened. "Again," she whispered. "They want to bury me again." The memories surged back, nights of sleepless labor under faceless management, whispered threats in her headset when she accidentally glimpsed a suspicious finance report, the years of hiding, changing names, cities, living like a shadow in the world of lights. She collapsed into a chair, covering her face with her hands. "They won't stop, Damien. I'm just a pawn, an excuse to take you down." Damien knelt before her, resting a hand on her knee. "No," he said, voice steady. "You are the reason I'll fight." She looked up at him, not seeking rescue, but beginning to wonder. Could she really run forever? In the following days, Damien and his team launched a silent investigation. They discovered a lead. 3 years ago, Mirage had been under quiet scrutiny for siphoning arts funding. But the case was buried. Now they were fabricating a scandal to deflect and destroy one woman, Lyra. Damien wanted to shield her, fly her out of the country, distract the press with a fake story, hire top lawyers. But Lyra, for the first time, refused to run. "No," she said firmly in a strategy meeting. "I won't disappear again. I'll speak. I'll tell the truth." Damien frowned. "Lyra, you don't need to burn yourself to protect me." "I'm not doing this for you," she said, her voice low but unwavering. "For once in my life, I won't run. I want the world to see me, not as a ghost, not as a rumor, but as the one who survived." Foti? The night before the press conference, Lyra sat alone in her lighting room, where she usually tested new visual patterns. Around her floated hundreds of LED strips in crimson, violet, silver, like falling stars suspended mid-air. She didn't speak. She just breathed. The reflections danced in her green eyes, making her look like a spirit being reborn from ash. The next morning, Damien and the tech team hacked into Mirage's live broadcast, where the CEO was preparing to expose the truth about Lyra Quinn. The screen glitched, the CEO's image vanished, and then Lyra appeared, silver hair loose, dressed in a black blouse, standing tall before the camera. Her voice rang out, not loud, not theatrical, but clear like a morning bell. "My name is Lyra Quinn. I once worked for Mirage Group. I was forced to work without pay. I saw financial crimes I was too scared to speak about. I ran, and I thought I would always live in fear. But today, I'm not afraid anymore." The screen lit up with documents Damien's team had recovered: internal emails, forged contracts, falsified reports, confidential wire transfers. Lyra stared into the camera, her words like carved stone. "I'm not perfect, but I will no longer let the past define me." The media erupted. Mirage was placed under federal investigation. Their stocks plummeted. Lyra was vindicated. That night, as they returned to the apartment, Lyra sat in silence on the balcony, watching the city shimmer beneath her. Damien stepped behind her, hand on her shoulder. She looked up at him, no longer uncertain, no longer haunted, just calm. "I'm not the same girl anymore," she said. "I don't live in the dark, and I don't have to run." Damien smiled, pulling her into his arms, and beneath the city of light, they both knew. Lyra was finally free. The press conference ended. The stage lights dimmed, and the room fell into an oddly still silence. Lyra stood alone at the center of the stage, her breath still uneven. She felt every cell in her body trembling, not from fear, but from a weight finally being lifted. For years, she had lived like a shadow, hiding, evading, existing somewhere between light and darkness. But now, for the first time, Lyra truly felt alive. She was no longer the girl who had been sold, no longer the fugitive running from memories, no longer the one who lit up others while forgetting she, too, deserved to shine. And most importantly, she was no longer alone. Damien had always been there, standing behind her, never trying to save her like a hero, but walking beside her like a true companion. She turned around and looked toward him, sitting among the now empty chairs. Their eyes met, no words spoken, just a deep, quiet understanding. They had made it through, together. Years had passed since the day Lyra stood beneath the stage lights, facing her past without trembling eyes. The city still sparkled as before, but to her and Damien, its lights now held an entirely different meaning. They lived in a small house on the outskirts of the city, where the glow of downtown lights shimmered faintly on the far horizon, just enough to remind them of the past, but no longer overwhelming. Their home was a blend of their two worlds, a cozy sound studio for Damien and a warm, light-filled corner where Lyra designed her lighting art. Nothing extravagant, nothing showy, just full of life. Damien had stepped away from his role as CEO of Lumina Corporation years ago. He still supported his team remotely, but most of his time now was devoted to the role he valued above all, being a husband and a father. Lyra had changed too. She was no longer the artist who lived in fear and defiance. She still created, still lit up stages for indie projects, but now she also knew how to pause, to listen, and to live more slowly. Some afternoons she would sit for hours by the window, just watching how the light shifted through the leaves, and feel peace. The connection between her and Damien was no longer just fiery kisses in the night or vows made in the middle of storms. It was the gentle touch of a hand while passing in the kitchen, the shared glance as they watched their son run barefoot across the warm tiles. Orion, their 5-year-old son with dark hair tinted violet and storm-gray eyes like Damien's, yet radiating Lyra's brilliance. Orion loved music. He loved light. He was the kind of child who could hear sound in colors and see shapes in melodies. To Orion, everything was a performance. One summer evening, as wind rustled through the treetops and faint stars dotted the sky, Orion dashed into the living room, eyes sparkling. "I want to perform on the rooftop tonight." Damien laughed, setting aside the guitar he had been tuning, while Lyra stepped out of the kitchen holding a roll of LED lights. "Well then, we'd better start setting up," she said, smiling in quiet conspiracy. Together they began preparing for what might be the smallest performance they'd ever done, yet the most meaningful. Damien arranged the speakers, choosing a track he had never released, a soundscape he had composed the night he first saw Lyra dance under red and violet lights. Lyra strung the LEDs along the rooftop railings, adjusting them just right to ensure Orion would shine at the center. And then Orion stepped onto his stage, a tiny rooftop covered in old rugs, surrounded by twinkling lights and real stars above. He bowed like a true performer, started the music, and danced to the beat of pulsing drums and soft piano. His steps weren't precise, but they were full of soul. Lyra adjusted the lights to follow his every move, while Damien sat nearby, fingers resting on the sound controls, eyes never leaving their son. When the track ended, Orion shouted, "I'm the light! I'm the light artist!" Lyra burst out laughing. Damien clapped like he was cheering a sold-out concert. Orion ran over, throwing his arms around them, sweat glistening on his forehead, his smile brighter than any spotlight. That night, after Orion fell asleep on the couch under the rooftop stars, the two adults stayed behind, sitting quietly beside each other. No words were needed. The twinkling lights reflected in their eyes, the same lights that once brought them together. On the rooftop, bathed in soft LED light, the three of them, Damien, Lyra, and Orion, held each other in quiet stillness. A gentle breeze brushed past the violet-colored strips, their glow reflected in their eyes like artificial stars scattered across the sky. Lyra leaned her head on Damien's shoulder, her voice a trembling whisper, yet full of certainty. "I saved myself, but you were the one who reminded me I was worth saving." Damien wrapped his arms around her more tightly, his lips brushing her silvery violet hair. "And you taught me what it means to feel." Orion slept soundly between them, still clutching his glowing baton in one small hand, like a piece of light passed down from the past into the future. Together, they looked up at the sky, where real stars and LED lights blended seamlessly, no longer divided by origin. In that moment, they were no longer broken souls. They were living proof that light doesn't just illuminate, it heals, it frees, and when shared, it becomes eternal.